Hello, today I'm going to be explaining aquatic biomes. So there's four primary characteristics of aquatic biomes. The first is salinity, which determines how much salt there is in a body of water and decides which species can survive and the water's usability for drinking. It basically determines if a piece of water is freshwater, an estuary, or an ocean. Depth influences how much sunlight can penetrate and reach plants below the surface for photosynthesis. This is important because plants provide much of the world's oxygen, which is vital for human survival. Next is flow. Determines which plants and organisms can survive and how much O2 can dissolve into the water. O2 is just oxygen. Temperature. Warmer water holds less dissolved oxygen, so it can support fewer aquatic organisms. Alright, now on to individual biomes. We're starting with the freshwater ones, specifically rivers and lakes. Rivers have high oxygen due to flow mixing water and the air. So basically, it'll take air from different areas and mix it with the water, and also carry nutrient-rich sediments. Deltas and floodplains have some of the most fertile soils in the world. Lakes are standing bodies of fresh water. Lakes are divided into four primary zones. First is the littoral zone, which is shallow water with emergent plants. Next is the limnetic zone, where light can reach for photosynthesis, but there's no rooted plants, only phytoplankton. In the littoral zone, the main plants you're going to find are unrooted ones, like lily pads. Next is the profundal zone. It's too deep for sunlight, so no photosynthesis can occur. Next is the benthic zone, which is the murky bottom where inverts, which are bugs, live. Invertebrates, such as bugs, live. And it also has nutrient-rich sediments. It's kind of in like the mixture between the limnetic and profundal zones on the soil part of the lake. Next is the freshwater wetlands. Wetland areas are areas with soil submerged and saturated in water for at least part of the year, but shallow enough for emergent plants. Plants living here have to be adapted to living with roots submerged in standing water. Cattails, lily pads, and reeds are some examples. Benefits of wetlands: stores excess water during storms, lessening floods. Recharges groundwater by absorbing rainfall into soil. Roots of wetland plants filter pollutants from water draining through. Highly high plant growth due to lots of water and nutrients in the form of dead organic matter in sediments. That's a swamp, and that's a cypress tree, which is an example of an organism in a swamp. That's a marsh. Those are reeds and cattails in a marsh. And that's a bog, which are a spruce and sphagnum moss. Estuaries, which are all a mix of salt and freshwater because they're areas where rivers empty into the ocean. Their high productivity in terms of plant growth due to nutrients and sediments deposited in estuaries by the river. Salt marsh, it's an estuary habitat along the coast in temperate climates, breeding ground for many fish and shellfish species. Mangrove swamps, an estuary habitat along the coast of tropical climates. Mangrove trees with long stilled roots stabilize shoreline and provide habitat for many species of fish and shellfish. Next is a coral reef. Warm shallow waters beyond the shoreline, most diverse marine biome on Earth. Mutualistic relationship between coral, which are animals, and algae, which are plants. If you didn't know, coral doesn't actually have color, it's just a gray organism, but the algae that grows on the coral gives it color. So the coral basically relies on the algae for energy, whereas the algae relies on the coral for a place to live. Corals take carbon dioxide out of the ocean to create calcium carbonate, exoskeleton, which is the reef itself, and also provide CO2 to the algae, which is carbon dioxide. Algae live in the reef and provide sugar, which is energy, to the coral through photosynthesis. Both species rely on each other. It's one of the most classic examples of mutualism. Intertidal zones. This is another example of saltwater. It's a narrow band of coastline between high and low tide. Organisms must be adapted to surviving crashing waves and direct sunlight/heat during low tide. For example, barnacles, sea stars, crabs that can attach themselves to rocks. Shells and tough outer skin can prevent drying out desiccation during low tides. That's just an example of all the types of organisms that can live in different levels of an intertidal zone. Some examples are a spiral rack, which curls up and secretes mucus to retain water during the low tide. Next is the open ocean. It's the lowest productivity area as only algae and phytoplankton can survive in most of the ocean. However, it's so large that algae and phytoplankton in the ocean produce a lot of the Earth's CO2 and absorb a lot of atmospheric CO2. The photic zone is the area where sunlight can reach and photosynthesis can occur. An aphotic zone, also known as the abyssal zone, is an area too deep for sunlight. That's where you get stuff like anglerfish and giant squids. And a lot of bioluminescent creatures also live in the aphotic zone. Anyways, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed and have a great day.